is it really going to be the grand divorce? Thank you very much for being part of this national conversations, even on Facebook, X, and all our other social media platforms. I want to take the public participation shortly, but before I do, we took a break just at the brink of, Professor getting into the peak of his submission. So, Professor, what were you saying really? So we can hear from Charles and Benji, who also wanted to react to what you were saying earlier.
Just like I was saying, this is an absurdity, because we are here witnessing a country parading an individual, wanting to impeach him for owning a piece of land, which I suspect we all do.
A piece of land?
When did it become an offense to own a piece of land in this country?
But there are more. There was a hotel.
Even if there are 10.
What do you mean?
Even if there are 100.
Okay.
When did it become an offense to have 10 parcels of land?
How did you acquire it?
When did it become an offense
to
have 2 billion worth of property? It has never been an offense in this country. Now, we are even elevating to an impeachable offense. When did it become an offense in this country to love your people? I mean, this is an absurdity. When did it become an offense to do some of these things over which is being accused?
A deputy president equally comes in as a symbol of national unity. I'm referring to the motion.
There's no problem.
And they're saying distinguishing and making Mount Kenya more prominent under the fact that we voted you and certain agreements we had is breaking that, disintegrating that symbol of national unity. Why don't the people who are doing that, which is a very good thing, and I would support it, why don't we start with a person with the power to allocate resources in the country and ask him, how come in a small cabinet of so many people, your people are there holding prominent positions? Let's start with you. That's why I'm saying the suckers. If it is an offense for somebody to love his people, let's see those who have demonstrated that by action. The people who hold the pen and the power, the ministers, who from the messenger to the driver to the PA to everybody, there are people who speak their languages. Because they have the power. They can execute that bias. From the president to ministers and all of us with responsibilities. And we have the power to hire people, and we hire our tribesmen. We promote our... Why are we jumping on a person who is merely verbalizing, merely speaking about loving his people, and leaving the people who have actually demonstrated and act that bias? That's what I'm saying. We can't be going like that as a country. All right.
We'll be losing it.
All right, Charles Munyui,
yes.
Now I'm made to understand there's also mechanics. There are also other people who should be kufa with the rest of the Dereva and Makanga. So we are not just supposed to be looking at the surface. That is what Professor is saying.
I think there are serious dynamics here, because as we deal with this, remember Gen Zs are there.
Right, yes.
They're watching, and they have placed the political class in one room, and they're just looking at them. And the thinking, if you assume that Gen Zs are with you, either because you are fighting the government or the government is fighting you, then there could be a problem. But having said that, so that I also come back to that, is that Gachagua is being accused, and I have heard Benji prosecuting the same and saying he has said very clearly he's a Mulima man, he's just about Mulima. Yet 40-something members of parliament from the same region have signed a notice of motion to have him removed. Yeah? When only 117 were needed for good reason, so that the others now will be convinced based on what is presented. Over 290 signed to have him go home. 291, including yes. members of parliament from the place he's accused of standing with. Yeah? Seeking resources for, seeking support for, seeking employment opportunities for. So I think to me this is bigger than even the issue of Mount Kenya region, as it were. And like I said from the onset, two things have come out clearly. Number one, the disconnect between the deputy president and members of parliament, both houses, is at play currently as we speak. And it's at play in a very, very big way. And remember, Gachagua came into power, into office without a the political party he was riding on is UDA.
But he has served politically in a position before?
As a deputy president?
Not as a deputy president.
Yeah.
He has been in politics, besides being a businessman.
He's a first-time MP.
But of course, but he served as a member of parliament. That's what I was going to.
He's been a member of parliament.
One-time first-time MP.
He's been a member of parliament. I'm not disputing that. Yes. I'm just saying he got into office in a very interesting way, to the extent that interviews were conducted where he was placed on a table and questions were put to him. And ultimately, MPs had to vote on whether he should be him or Professor Kindiki. And ultimately, the president said, no, much as you guys are supporting Professor Kindiki, I'm settling on this one. So he came in very weak, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I don't think he was even able to negotiate for anything, even for himself at that particular point. Subsequent to that, Gachagua is a politician also, like you said. I think what he started doing is to start campaigning, to start working his way up, so that ultimately in 2027, he can be able to now negotiate. And I think MPs did not work with him in that particular part. So to me, this is a bigger situation that needs looking into. But the biggest aspect of all this is civic education, if you ask me.
All right.
And the deputy president has found and appreciated that weakness on the part of Kenya in general, to the extent that he's able to come out there, deal with all those issues we are talking about. The issue of Mulima and power sharing and sharing of resources, he's able to send out information to the extent that people are asking, I didn't know we had 20%, I didn't know we had 30%, I didn't even know my region was, because he knows one of the issues he's being accused of is talking shareholding. He's now bringing documents on the table that are saying you actually sought a certain percentage of government. And I think if civic education was proper in this country, people would have known what the Political Parties Act provides for, and how coalitions are formed, and what documents are supposed to be signed and deposited with who, so that in the event there is a dispute, it can be resolved. If you look at public participation, for example, the average person out there assumed it's an election that is going on, and we are going to vote. That's why they were filling the ballot, at minimum destroying them. Because if we don't hii uchaguzi ifanyike, that means tunasema you are supporting this one. So all these things that have not been done properly in this country, including having the Political Parties Act providing for one thing, and then the Constitution saying all of us are equal before the law. Yet you are allowing a Political Parties Act to provide for an arrangement where people can decide how to share government. So this is the ecosystem that we need to deal with ultimately, much as we are talking about this impeachment. Because if you ask me, the way things are, the deputy president is likely to be sent home by both houses.
By both houses? Both
houses of parliament are likely to send him home. The reason as to why he might not go home yet, he might not allow himself to resign, even as much as he might be impeached and ultimately retired, for lack of a better way of putting it, removed from office, is he knows that it doesn't matter what happens to the application that he will file. The substantive petition will take quite a while to determine, and he will find himself in court. So in 2027, he can still go back to elections. And I think that's where he's looking at. He's looking at it in terms of, this is an ICC for him that will drive him up to 2027.
Interesting comparison as far as political career is concerned. I want to hear from Benji, but allow me, because Charles has really emphasized on civic education, but I also want to hear from the citizens themselves. I interacted with them. I was at Bomas of Kenya. Remember, that was across 47 counties, but centralized in certain areas. So I was at Bomas. I interacted with quite a number of these Kenyans, and some of them stood out. So allow me to pick this bite from, I think, Caroline Chepto. And according to her, well, I won't speak for her, this is what she had to say on Friday.
Na kama munataka sasa mujue opinion yangu sasa. Opinion yangu kama Caroline Chepto. Kama Caroline Chepto. Hakuna mwenye anabaki. Hakuna mwenye anabaki. Wewe, MP wakipitisha kwa parliament wanakula. Hakuna mwenye anabaki, na ikiwezekana pia MP waende. Hata MP waende. Hata magavana waende. Wametuzoea. Hakuna kutumika tena. Tumechoka. Tumechoka. Mnyonge ashuke.
Benji.
Anki, that's a Gen Z. And
that's a Kenyan?
Yes, that's a Kenyan.
Okay.
I have authority to speak on this because, for several reasons. First of all, I was in the Gen Z protests, and that is the energy. It's a fact that the government is unpopular. It's a fact that Kenyans are angry. Unlike Prof here, I'm not going to try to run away from realities or try to justify or rationalize wrongs. What we have to do here is to take the bull by the horns and to look at the situation for what it is, because if we continue down the path of dishonesty, if we continue to use the Constitution merely as, as tissue paper, if we continue to refuse to understand, to read and to internalize the precepts of this Constitution, we will never develop this country, we will never unite this country, we will never grow this country. Because what you're hearing on this table is that Gachagua has done this, Gachagua has done that, but so has that MP, so has the president, etc. And that is a false argument. I want to flag a few things, and maybe just before I do that, allow me on this panel to just make a full disclosure that indeed I have met the deputy president myself. This was a professional meeting to discuss work. It was very early on in the administration. This meeting was arranged by the party leadership. In fact, on the day that I met the deputy president, he was at State House with the president. I have a long record, and it's an office. His office is an office I've worked in before that actually I helped set up. And we really discussed communications and protocol work, all right? After our discussions, a few things jumped out at me. First of all, I did want to assist the deputy president because there's a humility to him, which is what you saw in his discussion, in his tactic to connect with the people. There's a humbleness to the deputy president, to Gachagua, that can actually be a very good thing and that can be built upon, where he can connect with the person in Madeira, the person at the grassroots, etc. The only problem is that my own take as a professional, as a political scientist, is the office is too big for Gachagua, because right from when Gachagua has gone in, you've seen his pronouncements, and all the problems he's in today are problems of his own making. When you are a deputy president and you are proclaiming yourself to first be a villager and ultimately only a villager, you are then, and let me just demonstrate an example. For instance here, the deputy president chairs the Intergovernmental Budget Council that looks at issues of counties, exchequer, how counties function, etc. Now, just imagine, madam, the deputy president is chairing this, and let's say I'm sitting there as a governor from Wajir, for example, from northeastern Kenya. The deputy president repeatedly says that our government is like a company. Nia shares, wengi wako na shares mingi, wengi wako na shares kidogo. Na kwa hii hisa, we pay benefits. In fact, the deputy president went further and said that he goes to State House, and when people are looking for jobs, he finds the ones who are ahead of the line, nena warudisha nyuma. Because I'm looking out for my own people. And mimi ni mutu ya murima. Now, he's chairing something that is overseeing all 47 counties. If you are a governor from Nyanza, if you're a governor from Migori, what business do you have to actually sit there with Gachagua, who has told you time and without number that he's a Murima person? So again, violation of the Constitution is not something that I'm making the argument. I'm being very objective in the sense that Kenya is more than Murima. That's all I'm saying. Kenya is more than Ukambani.
Right.
Kenya is more than the Indian Ocean where Mombasa County is. And so it's very, very important that we assert and expect that leaders be honest, that leaders be honest in private, that leaders be honest in public. The deputy president, for instance, said 7 million people voted for him. Right. That is not very honest. Why? The deputy president was picked by the president, and by so being picked, he then derived the value of the vote after bringing Mount Kenya, so to speak. So to make it look like he's a standalone recipient of 7 million votes is not accurate, is not truthful, is not proper. Is not proper, and we must say. That is why he's facing impeachment and removal from office.
So according to you, this truthful man, as he so pronounces himself, is not very truthful. Let me hear from Michael Agwanda.
I think for me today, I just want to...
Because even as you're speaking, one of the things, the grounds of impeachment is his undermining devolution. And of course, you've heard what Benji is
and undermining the president. And that's not me saying, look at the Constitution.
But he has said, even as you're telling us about the Constitution, Michael, the Deputy President made it clear yesterday that the President has not approached him personally, okay, in as far as he's concerned, and told him that, check here, my brother, you are undermining me. Those are the words of the Deputy President yesterday. He said Ruto has not told him that.
That's a lie.
Well, some of the accusations on the Deputy President are completely outrageous, as my friend here will say. For example, him going to counties and talking about drunkards and, mitigations on how illicit brew could be stamped out. I don't think that undermines the Constitution. I don't think that undermines the devolution in any way. I think some of them are a little bit outrageous and perhaps need to be called out as such. But then the reason why I'm here today is I want to look at the Deputy President coming out and saying, I want to address the nation. I want to tell them whom I am. And I'll pick some few things that the president said. First of all, the deputy president said that, he learned certain things from the president. Yes. And he made it very clear, especially calling out on government leaders that perhaps performing below par, and specifically the NIS boss that he had called out very, very strongly at one point or another. And of course, he said that the president himself had called out the IG at one point, that the IG was really not working very well, and that is learned very well from his boss. First of all, he needs to realize that when he's learning very well from his boss, he's the deputy president and his boss is the president, period.
Okay.
And that means there's certain things that the president can say because he's the president. And there's certain things he will be expected not to say because he's the deputy president. Listen, he takes the cue from the president. The deputy president is literally a principal assistant of the president. And therefore, you cannot say that whatever the president does, I can do it. No, it's still on the throne. And therefore, there are certain things that you really cannot just come out and say, if he blasted so-and-so, I can also blast so-and-so. I don't think that's how you balance the equation of the deputy president and the presidency, in my view.
Michael, just a scenario. Let's just bring in a case in point. When the deputy president called out the NIS, did you, in your own observation as a policy analyst, think he did anything wrong at that point in time during the Gen Z protest when he called out the NIS and said, you're probably, planning to put me, according to, of course, the deputy president and the former president, in a bad picture?
I don't think he was calling on the INS on the behalf of Gen Z. He was calling NIS on his own behalf.
Really?
Because he was accused. He thought that they were targeting him. And that is the reason why he was calling out on NIS.
You say they didn't give efficient information to the president at that time, as far as what the ground was saying.
But at that time, you remember where he was doing the press conference? It was somewhere else in Mombasa, while the president was somewhere in. That showed you the division that was already there. It was an insider. Why was it telling us at this point when the president is already struggling with this issue in State House? They should have been together. And that is the equation of them being together in this fiasco. I mean, it cannot play that he cannot suddenly say that I'm the saint out of this thing and the president needs to take a responsibility and not myself. If he's saying that, then perhaps a lot of things that he said, he should not have said in this first place. But let me move forward. He also said that, I was just there to fight Uhuru and then, the whole thing will be over with me. Was my responsibility just to fight Uhuru or not? I don't think that was the case. If he thought that his responsibility then was to fight Uhuru, and Uhuru had nothing to take home as in any accusation, then he should not have fought him in the first place. But if he believed that he was put there to fight Uhuru, and he believed with all of his heart that he needed to fight him, in fact, to an extent where they invaded Uhuru's land when President Ruto was out of the country, that was a different story. But what I'm saying is, when you say such a thing, then it's more or less like you're having a retrospect of what you've done and regretting on certain things that you've done. Right. But that is not how you want to run this country. And at this particular moment, when he's coming out and accusing the president and saying, when he was asked about whether the president has a nod on this thing or not, he knew very, very well that nothing can go to Parliament, and that might summoning parliamentarians and debating this matter in a matter of a day, and then public participation being called for without the hand of the president. He knew very well. The question is, and I said this, between the president and the president now, when he was the deputy president, I said, this problem that you are having with the president, why can't you go to the president and resolve this matter so that you don't bring Kenyans into something that you began together, and then you want to bring Kenyans into it when you suddenly disagree. When they were doing things in the bedroom, when they were doing things in their corners, they never brought people out here, and they never brought, in fact, they never even told us. Now it is the last minute, he's coming out and saying, oh, look, the share thing, it is not just about shares in government, but it's about what we signed. He never said it. What he meant then is not what he means now. He's having good lawyers, perhaps, that are helping him. But I tell you, a perception is not that he is being kicked out because he is unfit to hold that position. The perception is he's the one who has dug a hole for himself and is finding himself being buried in that very hole.
Very interesting remarks. Professor, I want to come back to you, but allow me to take a break so that when I come back, I come straight to you. I don't want to cut you short in that regard. Keep sending your feedback at KTN News throughout our social media platforms, and I can see your feedback overwhelmingly on YouTube. I'll read some of those, but allow us a short breather. When we come back, we started off with Herman Manyora as we progress.